Like most fake news these days, it all started with a friend's WhatsApp message, sharing an article with the header, quote unquote, Cape Town drivers to face congestion tax starting June 1st. And with a quick Google search, found that the city of Cape Town had already rubbished the article as fake news. But News24's disinformation desk is also on the job and found a whole lot more than it bargained for.
These were very generic WordPress websites using a very easily and relatively cheaply available template called GP Marketer. And it's a URL that was registered only about 3 weeks ago, which makes the viral breakout success quite alarming.
Sure. This 30-minute conversation with fact-checking aficionado Andrew Thompson next. Later in the show, we turn to crimes against women and children and get the verdict in the Jocelyn Smith trial in Saldanha Bay and get an update on the Oloratu Mongale murder case. And finally, News24 Food has the hot ticket to all the top events coming up this winter.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
You can get in touch. Mail us thelead@24.com. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News24. The fake Cape Town congestion tax article by Lighthouse Service Centre News reads like it's real. It's written by an apparent journalist named Raju Singh. The disinformation suggests Cape drivers will pay up to 25 Rand via an app moving through designated traffic zones at specific times. What a load of hot garbage. It's certainly giving e-toll vibes for sure. But if it sounds salacious, it's probably too good to be true. Always question it. Still, the fake news gained plenty of traction among South Africans, resharing it without so much as a closer look. I blame those pesky WhatsApp neighborhood groups. And so does Andrew Thompson. He's our editor at News24's disinformation desk, and he joins me now in our Cape Town studios to chat more about his investigation into this piece of hot fake news trash. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on The Lead. I really do appreciate it. The clouds have parted today. The sun is out for our discussion.
Yeah, and there's no congestion in the air today, it seems. Well, at least not of the traffic variety.
This is quite something. You have gone to town, for the lack of a better description, on this, and I can't wait for us to sort of get to the real golden nuggets inside. Let's first talk about the article, and when I shared it to you, I got it from a friend, full disclosure on WhatsApp. He asked me, is this fake news? And I was like, immediately thought of you, Andrew, and I forwarded that to you on your WhatsApp. Let's discuss the basis of it. I mean, if you open it up, it looks like, you know, a normal article, but the closer you look, it's fake.
Totally, yeah. I was grateful that you sent it to me, and I think often these stories arrive in a very similar manner of someone trusted and with a good knowledge of news saying, you know, here's something for you to dispel or debunk, and as you and I discussed at the time, it was clearly fake news from the outset. There was very little evidence to support it, but it did read very clearly and very well. It was a well-worded, fairly well-researched, quite specific article that named various Cape Town suburbs, a Rand-based fee that would be charged for cars that enter into the city. I think the initial major red flag was that it was discussed as being launched on the 1st of July. The concept of congestion tax in a city like Cape Town is not unheard of in many cities.
1st of June. Just
1st of June.
Yes.
Thank you. Check my facts. And I mean, that was about a week away at the time that it was circulating. And congestion tax is not unheard of in cities around the world. But the nature of these policies are that if there was a broader idea, it would have been going through a very extended process of public consideration. They would have had to moot it and put it in the government gazettes. And you know, it's a very long, laborious process. And that was an immediate, obvious red flag before I even opened the link. But from there, it led us down a fascinating path of disinformation disseminating throughout South Africa.
I mean, as fake news goes, like you say, I mean, the spelling is there, there's landmarks, there's specific times. I mean, you've mentioned the fact that it actually uses rand figures. And then you start looking a little bit closer at the images, and you can easily see that although, walking past very quickly, some would say, hey, that might look like the Cape Town City Council. And then obviously we as journalists, we don't recognize any of these potential speakers because...
Yeah.
ChatGPT in all likelihood created this fake news AI generated image.
And this is what's concerning is that, and we'll get to that in a bit, but the people producing this content may never have set foot in South Africa. But the benefit for them of generative AI is that they can produce stories that are hyperlocal with hyperlocal content down to the rand values. That's not only mentioning South African rands, but it's mentioning a potentially realistic figure. And throughout the process, we obviously checked the AI usage in all of these articles that we uncovered, and all of them are heavily AI dependent. So it's probably warrants another discussion about the impact that AI can have on the ease of which people can produce hyperlocal fake news, and that's probably one of the biggest concerns we have to confront.
Now, in this case, you can quickly Google it online. You'll find that the city of Cape Town, via its official sort of social media sources or its website, has already sort of in its own way debunked it and said, this is absolutely fake news, this claim of a congestion tax in Cape Town. And so that has done its job, if you will, right? Then we don't need Andrew anymore. No. Andrew always goes a bit deeper, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, that's usually where these fake news stories live and die, is it gets to either our desk at the disinformation desk, or it gets to the city council where their spokesperson says, look, this is nonsense, and, it's not true. And that's usually where these stories end. Thankfully. And then until the next one pops up, it's a bit like whack-a-mole. But something about this one just had me clicking a little further and thinking there was something a little bit too polished about it that intrigued me about the whole process. And so, I spent a little time digging and uncovered what is, I suppose, a hornet's nest of disinformation from around the world.
Absolutely. Let's just look at the about section, right, of this particular article on this particular website, and look past the glossiness for a couple of seconds. Lighthouse Service Center News. It's basically under the website URL of lighthouseservicecenter.co.za with the normal sort of abbreviation of what the headline of that particular article is. But of course, now we see at the bottom that there's this news aspect here. And then I see an address to Lighthouse Road, Umhlanga, South Africa. There's some links showing Poppy Act compliance, and claims that they're committed to accurate and responsible reporting, fact check policy, etc., etc. You picked up the phone and you made a few calls.
Yeah, so the first red flag on all of that was that address and the reference to this being an automotive car service center. And that address I then correlated with an actual car service center in Durban, and picked up the phone and called the owner, who, to his credit, initially thought it was some sort of scam, because it's not every day that someone phones you with a query about their website. And we had a chat as he opened the website in front of him. And to say he was shocked is an understatement. He hadn't looked at his website for about a week. He had some delays in the administration of it. He's a mechanic. His focus is on cars. And as he opened it while on the phone to me, he just expressed total shock at the nature of the content that he said to me he has never posted in his life before. And in that moment, it went from me thinking that it was his project that was disseminating this fake news to realizing that there's a much bigger story here that spreads far, far further than a simple mechanic in Durban.
Okay, now I'm excited. Okay, so where did you feel like you had to turn to next? Because obviously the owner of this particular website you've now just uncovered is not aware of these activities. He's just as shocked as you are. What then does the editor of News24's disinformation desk decide to do?
The next step for us was to dig into the actual content. I wanted to find out who was writing this content and where it was coming from. The author on all of these articles is, as you said in your intro, a guy called Raju Singh, who has a little bio card on the site, and it has
10 years of journalist, Andrew.
10 years of journalism, and widely respected for his fact-checking abilities and his coverage of automotive community-based topics.
You've got competition, bro.
And that was the thing that made me really look up and think, I don't know a journalist with this name. And I started to do a few background checks, and I couldn't find any reference to him. But what I could find while I was trying to research who Raju Singh is another website with exactly the same design for an entirely different business following the exact same modus operandi. And that belonged to a debt council, which was a council for debt collectors website. And I did exactly the same there as I tracked down the owner of that website, gave him a phone call, and he had the exact same total shock when I told him that his old URL was being used to spread fake news around South Africa. And the modus operandi on these two sites was identical, very different stories, but both were publishing very similar AI-generated fake news articles under the auspices of a different business.
Now, before we get to the golden nugget throughout all of this, I'd just like to point out some of the other, as you've just alluded to, fake news articles. Government's new energy plan could raise your electricity bill overnight, quote unquote, one of the fake news headlines. Don't be fooled, this common Sassa myth could cost you thousands. And then all the thumbnails, have these South African flags. They have, older black gentlemen, male figures within these particular thumbnails to sort of claim or illustrate the point that these may be sort of, public-facing government office holding people. A closer look would then reveal that these are all fake news images.
Yeah, as you say, a quick look is it's quite convincing. In many ways, a quick look, it's almost like the prompts have been put in. Make this look like Cyril Ramaphosa. And I had a couple of chuckles at them because anyone who knows what our politicians look like will know that there's a vague kind of AI like weird resemblance to some of the politicians, and obviously they just are punching in prompts to do it. But at thumbnail size, and especially removed from that populated website, it's very easy to understand how someone with a vested interest would very quickly go, oh, well, this looks important. I'm a SASSA grant recipient, or I believe that water shedding is going to be a thing in Cape Town, or the old South African nugget of load shedding is going to come back. Let me just quickly hit send and reshare this. And I think that's kind of the genius of this policy, is that it only takes one, like the congestion tax story, to be a breakout hit, and suddenly that is getting massive viral coverage in South Africa.
And it may have potentially, and I'm spitballing here, I'm speculating, but it may have potentially started with a very quick little question to ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever the case. What are the hot button topic issues in Cape Town and South Africa today? Is it SASSA? Is it race? What are those things? Because you looked a little bit closer at these two particular websites. Maybe somebody who understands how websites are built would quickly see that these are potentially made quite easily using a third-party program called WordPress, for example. But you soon find out that in terms of the ownership of these two particular domains, that they hadn't been owned by this particular company for very long. In actual fact, they hadn't been around for at least two months or so, right?
Exactly. So what I did with this process was I was desperate to find out who owns the websites. Both of those businesses don't currently own those domain names. So there's a service online called Whois, and you can plug in any URL into the service, and it'll give you fairly comprehensive details around who registered the website, where it is registered, what the nature of the business is. and the domain registrar. The difficulty now that we face is that those details, for privacy reasons, are now redacted, and it's very difficult without a subpoena to get the exact address of that business, that's where it's operating from, what the operation is. But what I did discover in the reams of information that we pulled was, as you say, these were very generic WordPress websites using a very easily and relatively cheaply available template called GP Marketer. And it's a URL that was registered only about 3 weeks ago, which makes the viral breakout success quite alarming.
Sure.
And subsequent to that, we discovered that it has been registered in India, and the business use is marketing agency. And that's all the information that we could get at this stage. Obviously, we reached out to the domain register. It's a German-based registrar. They declined to provide further details on this individual because the very nature of it is it's their private information. But it did just reveal a whole hornet's nest of chaos of fake news spreading around South Africa.
So, in other words, to put it very plainly and short to anyone listening right now, this is an Indian company that we're not naming at this stage, or we haven't got to the point where you perhaps have more information directing us to the exact location of the said company that's operating outside the auspices of South Africa, disseminating fake news through two particular URL domains right in South Africa today.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So essentially their tactic is to buy up domain names that have lapsed from established businesses. So like Lighthouse Service Center, the owner there forgot to renew his domain name. With the case of Debt Call Council, they actually changed their name and therefore changed their URL. Those domains then become publicly available. This company is now buying those domains and pretending to be the company that they bought those domains from. What then happens is you go onto that website thinking, I want to get my car serviced. You see this website full of information, and they're impersonating the local business. They've got, as we've discussed earlier, the business address. In some cases, they've got the details of the services that they offer, a broad overview of the operation in general.
You calling this domain hijacking, and I totally agree with you. Once I was reading it, the word hijacking, before you even used it in your article, came top of mind for me as a journalist. And one of our readers in the comment section wrote, verbatim, quote unquote, picking up an expired domain is not hijacking. It is 100% legit. The fake content is a problem. We can all agree there. But nothing was hijacked per se, is the comment from Flip the Bird. You actually took the time out, Andrew, to go and respond to this particular reader for your article. What your response there?
Yeah, I think it's an important point of clarity because ultimately what happens is you can buy an old domain name. If you forget to re-register your domain name, it becomes publicly available and anyone can buy it. My response to that is when you are rebuying a brand name domain and you are then impersonating that business and you are creating content to your own advantage that uses the history and the legacy of that business whose domain you've just bought, that constitutes a slightly bigger process of just buying an old domain and using it for your own website. So yeah,
it's nefarious.
It's yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely fits a journalistic definition of hijacking.
Absolutely, and I thought we just sort of covered that. But it brings us to sort of the finality here, and you also very brilliantly sort of got to the question before I started posing it in my mind, and what's the end game here? So oftentimes, you see these things and you think, is it the revenue generated by the number of people that are the foot traffic that's going to the particular site? Excuse me, Graham, I'm not that sort of well versed in these things. I'm sure there's other people sort of listening right now going, this host doesn't understand anything, and that's fine. What do you think is the end game, and is there any evidence to suggest of what that end game might be at this stage?
Yeah, I think the disinformation desk primarily deals with political motivation or some degree of trying to change a national psyche or spread some sort of message about politics, countries, businesses. This seems different to me. This doesn't seem to have a particular agenda. So while we're still unpicking the end game in this process, and hopefully we can uncover that more in future stories, my suspicion here is that it's a content marketing strategy. And essentially what they're doing is using really salacious fake news items to attract attention. Intriguingly, though, the website doesn't have a lot of advertising on it. There's no real data mining, so there's no real forms and stuff that they're really desperate to get people to submit. There's no spam. It's very curious to me, and I think that's why we're gonna have to stick with it a little bit longer and find out the companies behind it and actually dig into what we suspect is a very big network, probably not only affecting South Africa. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are similar websites that exist in countries around the world with very similar operations underway.
Sure, and the first time that I went to this particular article that we've been talking about on my desktop, it did ask me for my location and I blocked it just purely. So I don't know if there's something else there that we potentially not even looking at yet, but future coverage, and I know there's going to be a part 2 to all this discussion. I don't want you to give anything away just yet here on the lead, but you are working on something else, right?
Absolutely. So for this, I think it's really important to hold these types of organizations to account. Disinformation is a massive issue. And I think this proves how easy it is for a company with a few resources to really capitalize on that for their own gain. I think we're quite lucky in this case that it wasn't agenda driven, but it does show.
Yeah, it's not like Bell Pottinger,
exactly,
white monopoly capital,
yeah,
specific code words around state capture and trying to take over government's revenue streams.
Totally, but the next one could be, and I think that's what's really alarming. And I think the key point is also that congestion tax story does seem bonkers, but it was significant enough to attract the attention of the city of Cape Town, who had to then use their resources to debunk it and squash that rumor. And I think the next one might be more significant. And if this is what's happened in a week of that website being live, if there was a viral breakout success that quickly, then we need to be very cautious about this with this website and in future websites, because it's becoming increasingly easy to create a really compelling fake news website that captures the national attention.
Yeah, you're doing the absolute work of note here. How long does it take you to put something like this together? This is a lot of homework.
This was a lot of homework. This was about a week's worth of work. So it was slow digging, and it's as is the nature of these things. You pull on one thread and it unravels a lot more than you expect. So it's a dream story in many ways, because there's a bigger picture behind this. It's not a question of just debunking a single fake news story. It's actually looking at the networks that operate within this bigger spectrum and how complex and potentially problematic they can be.
And just to also remind you, if you're listening thus far, Andrew's doing this all on his own. And I think that's also important to just point out. You get editorial direction, you get people assisting you with maybe a couple of leads or whatever the case, but you're spending a week, sort of obsessing yourself with getting to the bottom of a topic. And I can imagine, because I've myself done a couple of smaller investigations in the past for, longer term stories, that rush of trying to get to the golden nugget of the information, the Indian company and where it is and what the end game is. I mean, it's exciting.
It is. And of course, disinformation doesn't sleep either. So, we juggling a lot of the more topical stories at the same time. We were fortunate that we could do a slightly longer burn on this one. But yeah, I'm sitting debunking this one while also trying to make sure that there's no other bigger disinformation that's spreading as well, and spread thin in terms of trying to navigate all of this. And it speaks to how much of this kind of information is coming out in South Africa and the world. So it's a tireless tiring task, but it's certainly not thankless.
I've sent Andrew this other particular WhatsApp that came across one of the groups that I'm in earlier today. It makes all sorts of claims about the level of what white people or white farmers in South Africa offer to the agricultural sort of output. And I know that potentially Andrew, when he has time, gets to look at all these things, because there's just a hell of a lot of mis and disinformation out there. Very quickly, I just wanted to quickly throw forward to your last two articles, and you don't have to go too much into detail. The coup that never happened, how Ivory Coast became a target of digital disinformation. I know that we wanted to talk about that just recently as well, but I think some of our other colleagues in the investigations desk of that team had some other news to share there. What happened here?
That was also a fascinating story that arrived via TikTok primarily. And it's still ongoing from a disinformation perspective, that there are people paid to produce content about certain military actions. And in this case, it was a coup in the Ivory Coast that came through as a verbatim report that actually journalists within this newsroom were immediately going, guys, I've heard this. Can we fact check this and make sure if it's happening or not? And through the assistance of some really smart military analysts and people who have contacts on the ground, we discovered that there's no such thing as a coup in Ivory Coast right at this moment, that it's all very clearly a paid media campaign ahead of the elections in Ivory Coast later this year. And so it's a fascinating world of paid influencers being given money in order to spread total nonsense about something as significant as a coup in a country. And people believed it, and it's still there. People are still posting as if it's happening, even though it's widely debunked by not just our news desk, but multiple around the world now.
There's another one that just speaks quite closely to that, and it's Ibrahim Traore. I don't know if you know him. He's one of the youngest leaders in Africa at the moment, in charge of Burkina Faso. He took over via coup. He's had to fend off 2 other coups since then, which is true. And there's a lot of these like sort of threads on X, formerly known as Twitter, where they go, look how fantastic he is. He's done this and he's done that. And there are some nuggets of truth in all of that. But it does seemingly also paint this picture of Russia as a key sort of ally and friend when it comes to Burkina Faso and to get the West out, because on an African stage. But it fails to mention, things that have been uncovered by analysts and people in the Sahel region that speak to, Burkina Faso giving the keys to a local gold mine to Russian businessmen and the influence of the Wagner group in the area, and that doesn't really talk about those things. So it's very interesting that we're getting a lot of that at the moment, especially within their African context.
It's fascinating, and the experts that I spoke to said, and they actually shared quite a lot of disinformation with me that's been circulating, particularly around Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. That is, it's fascinating that there's a lot of vested interest, and not just from within Africa, but like you say, players outside who are funding massive disinformation campaigns, and it's playing out on TikTok and YouTube with micro influencers. In many cases, they've got a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand followers, but the search for these terms on TikTok or YouTube is a fascinating, if not terrifying, process to go through, because you get guys telling gospel truth that is actually based in zero facts.
Absolutely. And then they go viral. And then particular discussions that you and I are having right now don't.
Exactly.
And then perhaps they do get found out later. And, I hope you're enjoying the chat thus far. Lastly, you also did a huge one. I don't even know how we even start with this. The headline reads, South Africa does not have 142 racist laws. Here's what the claim gets wrong. That's already going to get so much commentary by Andrew Thompson, of course. And then that's been going around. It's been repeated by the Pretoria-born tech billionaire Elon Musk, as well as the US President Donald Trump, that there's this apparent 142 racist laws in South Africa. It's not true, hey?
It's a very complex one, because essentially
putting it mildly.
Yeah. Essentially what's happened is a few people have searched through a collection of South African laws that contain reference to race, gender, and previous disadvantage status, and they've classed those laws as quote-unquote racist. What we did in that article was to look at the nature of the wording in each of the laws. We didn't go through all 142, because what happens very quickly is you determine a pattern that shows that the laws aren't racist. The laws may mention race, and there's a very important nuance there, that oftentimes it says the board must consist of a fair representation of race in South Africa. And they sit alongside other potential quotas like gender, disability, in order to create a fair, balanced, oftentimes board of an arts council or some sort of military operation oversight body. It's really about ensuring that there's fair and equal representation within these organizations. And so what we did is looked at that. And I think often I get accused of nitpicking, but there's a very important difference between racist and a law that mentions race. And I think that's the bone of contention that exists with that story, and the few hundred comments that sat below it debate that quite fiercely as well.
Does it ever get personal? I mean, we're talking about 334 comments for that particular piece. It's one thing to comment on a particular item of news, right? As opposed to just listening it and then maybe going talking to somebody outside. You know, like I get a few thousand. I'm lucky that the show's building steam. We're getting more people watching and listening and giving commentary. But to have 334 comments on a particular article, it's a hell of a lot. Does it ever get personal?
Yeah, I think probably 330 of those were about what a useless journalist I am, and that I'm pushing some sort of agenda or have some sort of ultimate ideal that I'm targeting.
That there's editors behind Andrew that are saying, you need to say this, Andrew, hey?
Exactly.
You need to, here's a piece of paper with my scribbles on it, you need to exactly say this.
And the irony of the whole thing is I have zero agenda and News24 has zero agenda, and not once has any editor come to me and said we need to push this narrative, not once. So, you know, although the vast majority of those comments were attacking me personally or the newsroom in general, it doesn't resonate, because I know that our goal simply is to present the facts as they are to the best of our ability.
I don't think we need to say anything more than that. I'm looking forward to your second installment in this absolutely fantastic debunking of disinformation and misinformation, how fake congestion tax story uncovered disinformation network built on hijacked South African domains. This is what a subscription at News24 gets you, by our disinformation desk editor, Andrew Thompson. Andrew, lovely chatting to you. Thanks, as Graham. Always. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the next couple of articles. I'm sure you're going to be in the weekend as well, as you always are. Chat soon.
Thank you.
To our trending topic now, and crimes against women and children have dominated our news headlines today. Starting in Saldanha Bay on the west coast, where High Court Judge Nathan Erasmus today handed life sentences to mother Kelly Smith, her partner Jacqueline Apollos, and their friend Stefano van Rijn for the kidnapping and trafficking of little Jocelyn Smith. The girl went missing from her Middle Pors home more than a year ago. Her whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. The trio stood without emotion as they learnt their fate.
Because your sentences are the same, I'm not going to draw any distinction, even though Mr. Van Rijn has previous convictions and you, Mr. Apollos and Ms. Smith, does not have. On the human trafficking charge, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. On the kidnapping charge, you are sentenced to 10 years imprisonment.
The trio's names will also be included in the National Child Protection Registry. That audio courtesy of our multimedia journalist on the ground, Storm Simpson. Meanwhile, Gauteng police say 2 known suspects are wanted for the murder of Joburg woman Olaratu Monkhale after her body was discovered in Lombardy West on Sunday. She'd reportedly been on a date with a man calling himself John. Now police tell us that the 2 men wanted for Monkhale's murder, Bongani Mtumkulu and Pilangenkosi Makanya, were in fact arrested and let out on bail last month for the robbery and kidnapping of another woman in Brakpan. It's understood the men confront women at malls and ask them out on dates before robbing them. To see what they look like, check out our trending article on the front page of News24.
Are you burnt out from the week that was, but need to stay in the news loop? Every Saturday morning at 6, we release The Weekender, a quirky, in-depth look at South Africa and its people. Chock full of exclusive interviews, food, wine, playlists, and opinions, The Weekender is the ultimate segue into Saturday, right here on News24.
And finally, summer may be sadly gone, but Mzansi's food festivals aren't. And News24 food editor Kelly Anderson has you covered with a comprehensive calendar of foodie dates to remember. Looking to improve your diet with plant-based, organic, sustainability first good foods? Well, the Good Life show is running in the Mother City from the CTICC this weekend, with an adult day pass setting you back around 175 Rand. Meanwhile, Johannesburg's hosting the Portuguese festival this weekend at the Nazareth, with a ticket costing just $80. It's a steal with helicopter rides, car drifting, good food, music, and a whole lot more. Cape Town takes over again throughout June with Feastival at Cabo Beach Club this Saturday only, and Marble's 7 Colour Sundays and the Africa Food Show roughly 2 weeks from now. Sure, all this talking's got me lekker hungry. From fake news to foodie festivals and a podcast to boot, News24's got so much to offer these days, and we appreciate each and every one of you for reading and listening. Our last episode, from Lesotho to Mfuleni, securing South Africa's precious water sources. Of course, we spoke to climate editor Lamise Zumarji about her reporting and gathering intel from Parliament regarding the much touted and historic Lesotho Highlands Water Project. Some of your comments there in our article. Rubber Duck writes, and many kiloliters of raw sewage are intentionally sent by incompetent and mismanaged municipalities into the natural waterways of Gauteng and everyone else in the country with no accountability from anyone. Of course, talking about that fantastic expose too of Wasteland by our colleague Sikunati Manchancha of the perilous past situation regarding the sewage seeping into the many critical conduits of the Vol River system. We'd love more of your mails, comments, especially voice notes. You can send them all to thelead@24.com. You can also comment below in our YouTube podcast channel. You can also comment in the Spotify as well as Apple podcast channels. All of those offer areas where you can leave your comment, and of course in our articles on News24. All I want to say is thank you. Inkosi, Ngiyabonga, Kialaboa, Danko, Shukran. Thank you for listening to our show. Have a fantastic weekend. My name's Graham Robinheim, and so long as there's credible, responsible, and fact-checked news, we'll have the lead.